When this drops, it will have been roughly 14 months since we all first learned about COVID and had to shelter in place in the States at least. And it would have been an interesting and provocative and disruptive year regardless, due to the election or Tiger King or wildfires, highly publicized and activating deaths and murders. But 14 months ago, in a matter of days, we lost going to school, and we lost our social interactions. We lost walking someone down the aisle. We lost visiting someone in the hospital. We lost going somewhere other than a corner of our bedrooms to go to work. And as the months have rolled on, we just keep losing. We've lost so much more. Not just my favorite movie theater, which closed recently, but lives. So many lives have been lost these last few months. See, we've faced so much more than just one pandemic. We've faced an education pandemic for sure, and a job and an income pandemic, but we've also faced a mental health pandemic and a violence pandemic. We faced a suicide pandemic. We faced an emotional pandemic. The message I have today, well, frankly, it can't address all of that, but I do think it addresses one of those. And the solution that I have for one of those pandemics, I think, could permeate actually into the other areas just a little bit as well. Many of us struggle with the change in rhythm that COVID brought. And it was fascinating what that change in rhythm dug up from the inside of us. Early on, I was interacting with so many people who were having an existential or a faith crisis because of a disruption in their rhythm. Something inside of them didn't seem to work anymore, given the chaos and the surprise and the shock of the outside. And it wasn't noticeable that they didn't have what they needed on the inside until life got messed with. I don't know if you can remember the earliest weeks of the pandemic, but what was it like for you? And what got you off track? What was brought up from the inside when life wasn't routine anymore, when your work life was off, or your family life was off, or your leisure life was disrupted? What was it like? What about your spiritual habits, if you have them? If you had practices pre-COVID, were those disrupted during the last few months? Have you leaned into them more? Have you neglected some of them? Have you felt like they weren't working and so you canned it all together? Throughout this series, and actually the companion series right before this one, we have been trying to integrate our lives more, to make sure that we have the assets in our inner world to meet the demands of our outer world. That's what all of this is about. And today, I want to end these two series by helping you establish a lifestyle that will make you stronger, frankly, than most people for the future chaos and surprises of life. But you should only keep listening to what I'm going to say if you want more to work with than you have now for the next time that your life gets knocked around. When I think about having an inside world strong enough to face whatever's going to be thrown at me in my outside world, I think of a few superheroes and superhero examples throughout history. Like about 2,500 years ago, there was this moment when Babylon invaded Jerusalem. History tells us this, not just the Jewish scriptures. And Babylon took spoils from Jerusalem, including human resources. They took humans out of Jerusalem in the form of promising young people, including the author of this ancient Jewish memoir called Daniel. That's the author of the memoir. It's his own sort of autobiography. And we studied his life in depth in a series that we called Anomalies, and you can actually find that on our channel with a link in the description box below. But these young people who were brought out of Jerusalem into Babylon were thrust into this rigorous training and these rituals to see if they could serve in this new culture, this new administration. So not only was their normal life ripped away from them, but there's also this overt effort to eliminate their distinctiveness as people. But it didn't work on a few of these guys. They didn't assimilate. How did they have what it took to stand against incredible disruption and incredible pressure? What gave them the internal fortitude to withstand the external pressures to compromise or to lose hope or to lose their faith? Well, it's all over Daniel's story. It's really not that big of a secret. It's just hard. So most people avoid doing it. Daniel prioritized the nurturing of his inside world through daily practices. It wasn't enough to, in our case, watch a message online and then pray whenever he felt like it. His life was strung together by habits. Another place that we see this really prominently, this same concept is actually a few centuries later, and it's in the first churches that formed around the news of Jesus' resurrection. Same ideas as Daniel, just more case studies they had in their history to prove that forming a life of habits actually worked. And I'll show you where we get this idea. It's actually in this account of what was happening in the events of those first churches. We call it Acts. Now, this is in Acts chapter 2, starting in verse 42. Listen to this. All the believers devoted, what a strong verb, devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to being with each other, and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, that's communion, and to prayer. Now listen to what was happening. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. That must have been tremendous. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, again, communion, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people, not just the believers. And each day, the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. These people had pressure too. Their world had been disrupted. Because of what they believed, they were getting death threats, and some of them were actually being killed and imprisoned because of their faith. But these values kept them strong. And this is so important. It seemed that when the pressure hit, or when the changes struck and life was not routine anymore, listen, they actually went deeper into these habits. They relied on them more rather than less when the outside world was more surprising and shocking. And I wonder how your life might have been different this last year if that's what you chose to do when life got thrown up in the air. If you grew up going to synagogue, or you grew up Christian or Catholic in a Mormon community, you probably heard some of the stories of these giants of faith, these superheroes in history. And when you hear these stories, you might have thought either, A, these were mythical characters meant to sort of inspire us, or B, these were just exceptional people, and there was no way you stood a chance of having that same integrity or stability, or were able to, face the same difficult circumstances or face the same fire that some of them faced. There's this story in Daniel of him surviving a night in a den of hungry lions. There's another story of his friends surviving a forced cremation. So I don't blame you for thinking, that's crazy, or I would never trust God that much if I was in the same predicament. But as I talk about how your life and my life could become stronger, I want you to ponder one thing. You have to choose in comfort what will serve you in crisis. We say it in Radius all the time. You have to choose in comfort what is going to serve you in crisis, however big or small that crisis is in the grand scheme of crises throughout history. You have to choose in comfort what is going to serve you in crisis. You're meant to live your own exceptional story, maybe one that we'll be reading about hundreds of years from now, maybe not, but your own exceptional story. But what it's going to mean is developing what some people have called a rule of life. Now, if that turns you off because it has the word rule in it, I don't blame you. If you're somebody who thinks that rules are what's wrong with religion, frankly, you're not wrong about that. So if by rules, what I'm talking about is things that you must do to earn God's love, then please stop this video right now and never click on another one from Radius. And I mean that, because a God who expects you to earn his love does not exist, even though a lot of people are afraid he does. But the heart behind this kind of rule that I'm talking about here is more like a ruler. It's meant to be a metaphor of like a guide. Maybe a better way to think about it is this metronome right here, right? This metronome is something that musicians are really, really familiar with, and some of you actually right now are having some PTSD listening to this because you've spent so many hours working with one of these. Good musicians have spent a lot of time interacting with this. It's this standard speed to which all of music aligns the song that they're playing. And I find that people who get knocked off track so easily by a challenge or some doubt are people who are also not practicing a rhythm in life that helps them stay in the groove of God is with you. God is for you. That's enough of that for now. A rule of life can be a statement, or maybe it's a manifesto. It's a series of habits, right? Rhythms that you will keep. Things that you can sort of get stuck in your head or stuck on your calendar so that you can almost instinctively refer to them throughout all of your days and weeks and even throughout all of your challenges. You might be wondering, like, well, what does that sound like?
My name is Matt Foley, and I am a motivational speaker.
You might be wondering, how long does it need to be? Or can I just copy and paste it from somewhere else? Probably none of that. But we're going to give you a completely free guide to making this happen in your life. You get to customize it. You get to choose what these rhythms look like, this rule of life looks like. And I'm telling you, 20 minutes spent with our free guide could make or break how you handle your next crisis. And I'll tell you how to get that guide in just a minute. So this rule of life is going to be a series of clear commitments that you make to yourself. And they're going to be daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly. And these series of commitments are going to deepen your understanding of yourself and of the God who made you and loves you and knows why you're on the planet. But I want to reinforce why you want to do this before I give you some specificity around what it's supposed to look like. Now you might be thinking that a metronome is restrictive. You can only play one kind of song, or there's just one kind of life that God wants you to live, and that's it, like you're boxed in. But that is not what this creates. A metronome, listen, actually creates freedom to express all kinds of things and yet still stay on track with the movement of God in your life and in the world. So just let me illustrate this and have a little bit of fun. Now, one way that you could play along with this beat is, and I'm going to show you how great I am at beatboxing here. You play it like this. But there will be times when to the exact same click, you can play it in halftime like this. And then maybe you get back on track. But then, of course, it can go the other way. And you can go into double time. Okay, thank you for just humoring me there. So what does all of that mean, Joseph? That's really, really cute. We're so proud of you that you can spit so well. What it actually means is that God wants to create something on the inside of us when we establish these commitments, these habits, this rule of life. And then you will have a deepening sense of joy, for instance. But that joy is going to play differently when you're grieving a loss. And it's going to play differently when you're celebrating the success of somebody that you used to resent. It means as you do this rhythm of life, this rule of life, you're going to have a deepening sense of God's purpose for your life, but it's going to show up differently when you're employed and differently when you're laid off. You're going to have this sense of meaning that's going to deepen into your soul, but it's going to show up differently when people are applauding you and differently when they're criticizing you. See, it's the same deepening, strengthening, stabilizing conviction that God is with you. God is for you, and it cannot be disrupted. It moves with your life. Your rule of life does not create restriction or routine. It creates freedom. Daniel faced insane disruptions and temptations and pressure, but you see throughout his life that he had a certain unwavering commitment to habits and rhythms that kept him locked in to God's power and God's presence in his life. The first Jesus followers maintained habits and it helped them endure incredible violence and character assassination heroically. But they had something that even some of the people persecuting them started longing for. They weren't shaken when life changed. They had wisdom to navigate through confusing moments in their lives. They had a sense of purpose that couldn't be taken away even when the politics changed. They never stopped caring for hurts and needs, even when they had hurts and needs. No wonder they grew exponentially. Sure, it's appealing to see someone who is happy all the time. But it's way more provocative to see someone who's stronger than anything life throws at them. See, real freedom isn't being able to do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it. That sounds totally awesome. But real freedom, and you know this down deep, is when you know you won't be shaken in the middle of circumstances you didn't choose. You'll still be standing in the face of hungry lions or fire, no matter who's president or what the diagnosis is, or whether she leaves you or not. But I can't stress this enough. You have to choose in comfort what will serve you in crisis. It does not make life easier. It just makes you stronger. Now, I'm about to tell you how to get the guide and start designing this for yourself, but I want to highlight just one beat that you might overlook when you're creating your own rule of life if you do not know how powerful it is. You must commit to yourself that you will practice awe. I'm telling you, the experience of awe. It might just be the sight of the Grand Canyon or the birth of a child, a spectacular thunderstorm, is that sensation that expands your awareness without some sense of God. However you want to imagine God right now, I don't think you can really function, not logically. We've never completely done away with our longing for something greater than ourselves. When Nietzsche pronounced that God was dead, famously, he wasn't celebrating, and that gets so misdirected and miscommunicated over the years. When Nietzsche first said God is dead, it was actually a lament if you read it in context. Nietzsche was a really, really smart man, and he knew that without the reality of something that was outside of carbon and chaos, we were left with nothing more than just our own preferences. There is no meaning that transcends whatever you make up for yourself. There is no real value to your life other than what you just pretend you're worth. David Hume actually expanded on this work. Maybe you've been exposed to some of his work. Preference. In other words, what you want to do or what's right for you is all you have, which Nietzsche knew was really just a way for us to ignore the fact that we have nothing to live for. And you are truly all alone in an uncaring universe, no matter what you would prefer to think. I think it's also why humanity can't help but deify all kinds of things. We deify our politics, or we deify our celebrities, or we deify our parents. We certainly deify ourselves. Because you have to have a God. Even if you feel like you're making up he, she, it, or they, you have to have a God to tell you what you're worth and to tell you why you're here and to tell you how to live. And that's why I want to invite you to a practice in your rule of life of worship. I think worship is core. It's core to my rule of life. Worship is not the practice of sort of distracting me from real life, not at all. It's imposing things that I trust are also true into the disappointments or the pride or the anger of my moment. I want to see everything that is true, not just my pain, but a God who knows what to do with my pain. So, how can you get started with your rule of life? Because I hope and I have been praying that you will do this. It's really simple. You can find it right on the first page of our website at radius.church. Go there right now and download your free guide to developing your own rule of life. It's 20 minutes. And it truly may change what you are working with the next time life throws a curveball at you. But let me warn you, it's going to feel a little clunky at first, maybe even a little tedious at first. That's totally okay. What great session players will tell you, those cats that are recording music in the studio, these are men and women who have played hours, so many days with this metronome, is that when it actually comes time to lay down the track, when it's actually time to perform the song, and they have this click playing in their ears, when they're experienced and they really are into the song, they actually stop hearing the click at all because they're playing in such synchronicity with it. It's only invasive to them. It only becomes truly annoying to them. They only hear it when they are off track with the song. And life might be moving at one speed, but because of stress or distractions or fear or pride, we start to live a little bit off track. And then we start to hear that rule of life again, bringing us back to those habits again. And at some point, we remember, I am with you. I am for you. And we lay back into the song of life and the movement of God, and we're living in reality again.
Thank you for joining us this week. If you're new, we want to meet and support you. Just go to radius.church and click the I'm New button so we can have someone to reach out to you, get your free Starbucks gift card. And next week's message is all about racial unity, a sensitive but important subject in our society. So invite those people in your radius of influence who need to hear what God has to say about the topic. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us reach more people. And remember, no matter where you're at, Radius is here for you. See you next week, Radius.